All right, let's get down to business. I mean, Mahomes, Purdy, whatever, Chiefs Niners, it was the story out in Vegas, but definitely like high up on the storyline chart was the rebuild of the Commanders, hiring Dan Quinn, hiring Cliff Kingsbury, Adam Peters and his involvement, and a little bit of like that kind of the Ben Johnson, Mike McDonald subplot was also a big part of this thing, right? So I made a point of trying to find people at the Super Bowl that had ties to somebody that's a new part of the Commanders organization. And Matt Ryan, I mean, when you think about those Falcons teams that Dan Quinn was the head coach of, when you think about 28-3 in that Super Bowl, I mean, really the primary players are Quinn, Kyle Shanahan, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones. Like that's what you think of with those Falcons teams, right? You agree?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I tracked down Matt Ryan during Super Bowl week, and combined with the help of Nikki Jabala, we kind of tag teamed it. We talked to Ryan about Dan Quinn.
It was, my first time in the NFL when Dan came in, going through a coaching change, and with that, comes a shakeup in your routine, and it's different people in the building. You got all these new people, so it was the most turnover that I had ever felt. There was also a lot of turnover on our roster, and so it was me being in the same building for a long time, but it was a lot of different people and learning a new culture, a new way of doing things. But he made you comfortable really quickly, and I think that's one of his greatest strengths is that he makes guys comfortable, free to be themselves, and free to play the way that they're capable of. And I'm pumped for him and Stacy.
You think now's the right time for him to get a second chance?
Dan Quinn? Yeah, absolutely. In my opinion, I always thought he would be a head coach again, and I thought he did a great job in Dallas. I know, there was criticism of the last playoff game, but if you look at his time and what they did on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, he showcased what kind of coach he is, right? And I'm not surprised at all that he's got another opportunity.
I think it's important to hear from the guys that played for Dan, especially when he was a head coach. So great job catching up with Matt. It's not like you had to go far in Vegas to find somebody who had a connection to all of these Commanders hires.
Sure. I mean, obviously the headliner of connections to these Commanders hires is Kyle Shanahan, head coach of the Niners. Adam Peters was just in San Fran. Adam Peters has been in San Fran as long as Kyle, until last month when he took the job here. And obviously Kyle worked for Dan Quinn in Atlanta. Here is Kyle Shanahan on the Commanders' new brain trust.
I'm so pumped for Dan. I'm so pumped for Washington. Dan's a hell of a coach. They got a hell of a one. I know they've gone through a lot of stuff in these last 20 years, but having AP and DQ is as good as it gets. Like, Dan taught me so much in Atlanta. I'm very grateful for how much he's helped my career, and him and Stacy, and just what he's going to do for their organization. Knowing Adam, knowing Jen, like, they're set up very well. What's that? I just loved watching how he ran the team. Certain things he did on the meetings and stuff. You take things from everybody, but Dan, the way he carried himself, the way he talked to the team, was as good as I've been around.
Obviously, Kyle's going to say nice things about these guys. I think he's being sincere. I certainly am more excited about Peters and Quinn, but maybe this will all work together well. I think the personnel stuff is what's most important here, and kind of rebuilding an organization. It was funny being out there, and I went to a couple of the Niners avails, which were a legitimate 30, 40 minutes outside of Vegas into the desert. And when Quinn is certainly the more verbose of the two. Even at his pressers, Peters is a little more guarded, doesn't give you a lot of insight. Like, he's a nice guy and everything, but he's not really declaring anything, whereas Quinn talked about, we want physical, explosive players. Looking at the 49ers, they got physical, explosive players like all over the field. And one thing I absolutely think is going to happen is some level of investment in the linebacker room. Maybe they're able to get the best out of Jamin and get him back on track. But if you just look at that Niners defense, how good they are on that middle level is just so different than how everything has been in Washington. But Kyle liking that Dan Quinn and Adam Peters have landed in Washington is not a surprise, but also think he's telling the truth. I don't think it's just lip service.